This initiative also ties into the Sustainable Development Goal set by the United Nations General Assembly under goal number 15, Life Below Water. Our seminar today discusses technology that will contribute to this initiative as well as the overall goals of cleaning up our seas. It discusses artificial intelligence that will detect and quantify microplastic debris in the waters, as plastic debris is one of the biggest threats to marine life and water pollution. The work that will be presented here today is utmost important. Again, I would like to thank Dr. Mohammed Hera and Dr. Rahim Awa for their incredible hard work and efforts in creating this seminar series. Without further ado, I would like also to welcome Dr. Frederic Stahl from the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence and wish you a very successful seminar. Thank you so much.
Okay, so the plan is Frederic will start now. We will have an opportunity for 10 to 20 minutes Q&A session. So I just want to have a special thanks to Fred. Fred is my close friend. I know him 11 years ago. He's my second highest co-author. I co-authored with him more than 20 publications, from a monograph book to journal articles to book chapters. So it's a great pleasure to have him in our first seminar in this series. So it's all yours, Fred. Thank you.
Right. So first of all, thank you for the very kind introduction. I hope you can all hear me well. It's a pity I can't give this talk in person. I would have loved to do that, but maybe when times change and this whole crisis with COVID-19 is getting better, perhaps we can repeat this at some stage and do this in person. I would really love to do that. So thank you very much for inviting me to give this talk today. I will now attempt to share my slides with you. I hope that works. And sorry. Can you see the slides? So I can see the slides, but I can't see you. I hope it. Please shout if you can't see them, and then I will try to wait a bit for it to load. Well, before I start the talk, I'd like to first give a few words on actually who we are at the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence. And I have also heard that that the audience is quite diverse, so there might be some computer science students in the first year, but there may also be medical students here. So I've decided to also put a bit of an introduction to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and neural networks in the talk. Good. So, well, who are we at the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence? So we are actually the DFKI laboratory in Lower Saxony. So we are a federal state, Germany, and our research department is located in Lower Saxony, which is at the very north in Germany, which is very close to the North Sea. And our research department is dedicated to marine perception. So that means we do all sorts of research that is related to water, mainly in the seawater, salty water, but also in river environments, lakes, etc. Anything that has to do with water, really, and environment is where we are interested in. The German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence is actually organized as a company. So we are, well, GmbH, which is similar to a limited company in the English-speaking world. We are a public-private partnership, which means that our shareholders are a range of companies, which you see displayed here, but also some of the local states in Germany. So we are a non-profit company. So we do not try to make profit, we try to do research. We actually been there since 1988. So, well, AI is being a buzzword these days, but we actually have been doing this for a very long time. And with about 700 researchers and over 1,000 employees in total, I think we are at least the largest public research center for AI. So we have about 20 research departments and actually over 20 research departments and 4 departments that are highlighted here in red. These are the ones in Lower Saxony. So you see on the map, the red dot at the very top, that is actually where I am sitting right now. So this is, we are relatively close to the seaside here, which is sort of imperative if you want to do research in marine perception. But enough of who we are. First, a few preliminaries, because I appreciate that the audience is quite diverse. So I thought it might be good with all these buzzwords floating around. What is AI? What is machine learning? Neural networks? To actually give a little bit of structure into this and to highlight at least the basic ideas behind it. So AI versus machine learning versus deep learning. Well, what is AI? I've looked for some good definitions of it, and a good one that I found is from Chu and McCarthy, which is AI is typically defined as the ability of a machine to perform cognitive functions that we associate with human minds, such as perceiving, reasoning, learning, interacting with the environment, problem solving, exercising creativity. I'd actually like to give my personal view here. I mean, functions that we associate with human minds. I actually like to extend this with to actually the animal kingdom as well, because they're also, I think also a dog or a cat exhibits some intelligence, and a lot of the techniques we use in AI are actually inspired from biological brains. So I wouldn't just say human brains, I would say biological brains. So in a way, AI is this definition, AI is actually a very large area of research. And one subset of research within artificial intelligence is machine learning. So machine learning is defined as the study of computer algorithms that allow computer programs to automatically improve through experience. So it is a way that computers learn, how computer programs learn. So in contrast to traditional programming, automatization through programming, where you have rules and data and you apply your classical program in order to where your program applies the rules on the data to derive answers. We actually, in machine learning, we try to derive the rules. So we give the machine, okay, this is the data and this is what the answer should be. Now learn some function, some model that actually maps this data onto to produce the correct answers. And a subset of machine learning is are neural networks. And a subset of neural networks technique is deep learning techniques or convolutional neural networks, or short CNNs. So this is a little bit at my heart that to mention here that when people talk about machine learning, they often refer to neural networks or to deep learning. It's actually not the same. Deep learning or neural networks is one technique of machine learning. There are many more techniques. There is ensemble learning. I know that Professor Garber is doing a lot of work in the area of ensemble learning. There are decision trees, knife-based techniques. There are many techniques here. But the talk I'm giving today, the research here, we are actually using deep learning or convolutional neural networks. So I have another 2 slides on these networks. So what is a neural network? So a neural network is inspired by how biological brains work. So on the top left of the slide, you have depicted a biological neuron. So we have a neuron and we have connections to this neuron from other neurons. And these neurons, they receive signals from neurons, which are usually in some form of some electrical signal. And these neurons, they can then on themselves emit signals to other neurons. So, and in artificial intelligence, or in particular in machine learning, and there in the area of neural networks, artificial neural networks, we actually try to simulate this or emulate this in a computer program. So where we have inputs from other neurons, and we have some summing functions that sum up the different signals, and some activation or transfer function that then triggers the neuron to fire themselves and to pass on some signal to other neurons they are connected to. And in an artificial neural network, we have them organized in, we have a large number of these neurons organized. So on the top right corner of the slide, you see a multi-layer perceptron where we have an input layer, and this input layer we feed in the data. Then we have some hidden layers in the middle, and then we have an output layer where we receive the answers. And these layers and neurons, they are connected. And these are the connections I have mentioned before of the perceptrons. And the task is now to actually make these to make these neural networks learn. So how do we use these neural networks once we have them? Well, we can typically use them for classification tasks. There are other tasks we can use them for, but the main tasks are classification tasks. So given a collection of data records, which we call training data, each record would contain a set of attributes, and one of the attributes is typically a class attribute, and this is an attribute of interest that we wish to predict if we have unseen data instances where we do not know this class. So we want to have a network that can make these sort of predictions. So for example, if you have images of cats or dogs, but you do not know if there's a cat or dog in it, and you want to have a neural network that you can use a neural network that automatizes, that learns from examples. So if you have a new cat, a new image, you can actually use the network to predict, is a cat depicted in the image or is a dog depicted in the image. Also, there one of the most one of the most popular applications of neural networks is visual intelligence or computational vision. There are other, you do not have to apply them just on image data. Of course, there's marketing data, you can apply them to financial data. There are many applications, so they're not just limited to image data. But of course, this is where they really excel, especially deep neural networks, and deliver relatively good results. But now we know what a neural network is, but how do we actually set a neural network up? I mean, there are connections. On these connections, there are weights. The signals are passed from neuron to neuron along these connections, and they're weighted in certain ways. So we all need to sort of modify this. We need to set these weights so in a way that it actually the neural network actually produces good results. So for this, we usually need examples. If you remember machine learning, we try to give the computer the answers and the data, and the computer has to derive the rules. So in this case, in our case, the rules is a neural network. So we have a set of labeled data. We need some data where we actually know the answers already. And we typically split this into 3 subsets. There should be no overlap between the subsets. So on these subsets is a training data set, a validation data set, and the test data set. So what we do now with the training and the validation data, we adjust the weight. So we use the training data to adjust the weights, and on the validation data, we observe if the network improves if I have adjusted the weights. And the adjustment of the weights happens again through an algorithm. So we don't do this manually. We have potentially many thousands of connections in there. So we cannot do this manually. So there are algorithms that you can use to actually adjust these weights. But the important thing is you use the training data to adjust the weights and the validation data to feedback information into the network. Have I got it right or have I got it wrong? And once I have trained and validated the network, so once it has once it's finished training, I need to apply it on a test data set. This is a separate data set that must not have been used in the training and validation process. The reason why we do this is that there's one danger in training these neural networks, and that is that they overfit. So in a way, I try to optimize them towards the validation data. So they might be overtrained, they might overfit on over-optimized on the validation data. So if it encounters data it has never seen before, it might not perform well. So in order to have a really good assessment how good the network really is, we need to apply a separate data set, data that it hasn't seen before, which is called a test set. So, and for the research presented in this talk, we are actually using convolutional neural networks, or short CNNs. And there are multi-layer perceptrons, like the ones you have seen before. They contain dense layers, which means that are layers that are fully connected. So each neuron in one layer is connected to all the neurons in the adjacent layers. They typically contain many of these hidden layers. Hence, they're also called deep learning networks, because they're very deep. Their structure is very deep, so they have many, many layers. What is more special about convolutional neural networks is that they have so-called convolutional layers. So they have filters and detectors, for example, edge detectors, embedded in these layers that can already identify certain shapes and can combine shapes. And that makes them relatively accurate. Also, they're very data hungry, so they need a lot of data. They need a lot of training and validation data in order to perform well. They actually can be trained to a relatively high accuracy. And they're typically used, and they are very good for excel on image classification and object detection. And I've put in here a reference, which I think is a relatively good overview of deep learning and neural networks in general, and gives you a bit of a history of neural networks in general, which is a paper by Schmidhuber, Deep Learning in Neural Networks, an Overview. This paper is actually open access, so you should be able to download it free and read it. Good. So I think it's enough of the preliminaries. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea what artificial intelligence is, what machine learning is, what neural networks is, and how they differ from each other. But now to the actual research we are doing at DFKI. This is just one research project I'm highlighting here. So we have many research projects that have not just to do with plastic debris detection. It's also, we have projects on other applications such as oil spill detection or soot detection in water and various other things. But this is actually a series of projects we have with the World Bank Group and with the University of Oldenburg, which is the local university here that we are working with. The results I'm presenting here is actually the pilot project we had and we conducted in Cambodia. And what it is about an artificial intelligence for the automatic aquatic macroplastic debris detection and quantification. So a bit of an outline, what is happening next? Well, I will give you a few slides on the motivation, why we want to do this research. Actually, you have heard at the beginning that one of the sustainability goals of the United Nations is to actually tackle the problem of of the plastic debris in the ocean. So that was already mentioned in the introduction.
Fred, there is a... Yeah, okay. there was a bit of a synchronization problem with the slide. So, are you now in an outline slide or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So have you seen the slide on convolutional neural networks?
Probably we stopped at the one about neural networks, the one that you described what a neural network is. The CNN one didn't come, no.
And the training?
Yeah, the training, test, and validation, that was the slide. Yep, okay.
Okay. So yeah, I'm at an outline slide now for the actual research. So I will unshare it and share it again, see if that works. So can you see this now? Can you see the slide?
Yes. Thanks.
Okay, good. So I will have a few slides on the motivation behind this research. We'll explain the experimental setting, give you an overview of the method, the data that we use and collected, share some initial results we have here, and well, a bit of a discussion and outlook what we are currently doing and where to go next. So this slide here, a motivation slide, I will just let this sink in for a minute. Have a look at this slide and try to think about what you can see here. Right. So what is obviously this is an image that is taken from from a bird's eye perspective. It's actually taken from a drone. I think it's about 50 meters altitude here, and is somewhere in Cambodia. And what you can see here is in between these two bridges.
We can't.
Sorry,
Sorry, Fred. We can't see it. So can you probably share again?
Can you see it now?
The connection. So no. Yeah. We can see it now. Motivation, right?
Okay. Yeah. Maybe I don't go full screen. Maybe that's better for the system. Okay. So what you can see here is plastic debris. In between these two bridges, you see this small spot, right, with like white dots on top. This is plastic debris. And if you look at the very right of the picture, you can see there is actually quite a lot of plastic debris accumulating. And I think the image speaks really for itself. Here's the second picture. So what you can see here is sorry, I have a feedback. I can hear myself right now. Okay.
Okay, no,
Can you hear me?
it's okay. I'll mute. Don't worry. Okay,
good. So what you can see here is also taken from a drone, which is about 6 meter altitude. And what you can see here is actually that the composition of the plastic waste. So you can see here a lot of bottles. You can see here food containers. So we can conclude probably this is coming from a nearby street food shop or some fast food restaurant somewhere close by. Another picture here. Do you think this is a landfill? actually, this is a river, if you believe it or not. This is actually a river that is simply so densely polluted that you actually cannot see the water anymore. We call this, this type of pollution, we call it a plastic carpet. So this is very dramatic, actually, and this is in an urban environment. This is in the middle of a city. And this is a scenario from the beach. Here you can see the plastic waste looks again a bit different. Here you have a lot of water bottles in there, but you can also see stuff like flip-flops. So there could be a hint that, well, there might be a problem with a holiday resort somewhere. So can you see this slide with the statistics? So, Mohammed, can you still hear me? Okay, so what you see here is some statistics. They're a little bit old. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any newer ones. But what you can see here is how much plastic is actually produced. It's about 270 million metric tons of plastic waste every year. About 100 million metric tons are actually coastal plastic waste, so means they happen in the coastal areas. And about more than 30 metric tons of it is mismanaged, so means they actually do not end up in landfills, they do not end up in recycling plants, they end up somewhere in the wild. And about 8 million metric tons, they go into the ocean. So it's estimated that about 1.1 to 2.4 million metric tons of plastic plastic waste every year enters the ocean from rivers, just from rivers. And about the top 20 polluting rivers are mostly located in Asia, and the accumulation of mismanaged plastic waste is disproportionately high in Asian countries. And what you can imagine, what happens in Asian countries, especially in Southeast Asia, there is the rainy season, so it will rain a lot and it will wash these plastic waste into the sea. So the rivers will be clean, but it will end up in the ocean. And once it is in the ocean, it's nearly impossible to get it out of there. Once it's in there, it's very difficult to clean up. So for this reason, we do this research in order to tackle it a bit more closer to the source where the plastic actually enters the sea. So what effects does plastic in the oceans have? Well, animals like seals, turtles, and birds can get caught in larger plastic debris particles. And we talk here about macroplastic. So macroplastic is plastic that is larger than 5 millimeters. Animals mistake often macroplastics as objects of their natural diet, so they eat them and they might die from it. And often these macroplastics later on disintegrate into microplastics. So microplastics, we speak of plastics that have a particle size of less than 5 millimeters. And they're equally problematic because they contain in phytoplankton. They have been found in stomachs of fishes, and they can enter the human food chain. So why do we need a study? Why do we need to try to monitor and quantify how much plastic there is? Well, if we can assess the plastic pollution on the objects in rivers and the number of debris items of certain types in rivers, then we have actionable information that can be used then by authorities to develop and governments to develop policies. to direct and support waste management and to better estimate the plastic emission from rivers into the ocean. So to understand the problem better in a way. So very few studies exist for remote sensing of plastics in rivers. So most of the studies that do exist, they either focus on beach scenarios and on land scenarios. So, and why do we do this particular study? Well, we work here with the World Bank, and the World Bank finances waste management in Cambodia. So, in order to reduce the waste, the plastic waste in the environment and in rivers and on beaches. And they want to have an instrument how we can remotely control and quantify the effects of the measures that have been taken to tackle the problem. Here on this slide, there's actually a picture of the river that you have seen from the bird's eye perspective earlier, where you couldn't see the water. This is actually the river. And normally there is a video and we can see how the plastic carpet moves along here. But I have omitted this video because I do not really want to stretch the bandwidth too much today. So what did we do? How was our experimental setup? Well, we have collected data locally. So we have actually gone to sites, identified sites where there is plastic waste, and where there is plastic waste, and have people there that actually measure how much items there are, what type of items there are, and then we have taken pictures of these scenarios. So we knew what the ground truth is. We knew, okay, there is that much plastic, and these are the types of items that you can find there. And then we have trained a deep learning network. Actually, we have trained several deep learning networks, and one of the networks is simply estimating, okay, there is plastic waste, or there is vegetation, or there's water, and the other one is a bit more detailed. It actually answers also what type of plastic items there are located and how many of them there are. So if we go to the next slide. Mohamed, can you switch to the next slide? Good. So what you can see here, we have conducted a study in Cambodia, in 3 cities in Cambodia, Siem Reap, Phnom Penh, and Sihanoukville. And we have actually tried to get our networks to work on different types of scenarios. So the beach scenarios, very thick plastic carpets, like in the river you've seen just on the slide before, and on more lightly polluted areas as well. So if you go to the next slide. Now, so here you can see what we did on the ground. We actually did, if we identified an area with plastic waste, we tried different scenarios with different levels of pollution. We put some markers there to mark a area of 2 by 2 meters. And then we were flying the drones over it. With larger areas, like beaches, we have actually used fixed-wing drones because they're very fast. And with other more ravine areas, we have used quadcopter drones. And afterwards, we have then counted what types of items there are in within these particular boundaries. So if you move to the next slide. Mohamed, can you move to the next slide? Yeah, thank you. So what we can see here is the drone we use, which is a Phantom drone. It has a 20 megapixel camera, so it's a fairly standard camera. And we have taken these pictures from a 6 meter altitude. And it's a fairly standard and fairly robust drone. And the reason we use this is because the company that we hired to fly these drones locally, they had a lot of experience with this drone. So if you go to the next slide, you can see the methodology that we use, like a high-level view of the methodology. Mohamed, can you click to the next slide? Yeah, good. So what we did is, once you have an input image with plastic waste, this input image will be chopped into tiles. So there are two different things that are happening. On the top, you can see a network that we term PDD, or plastic debris detector. So this is a bit more higher level network that detects if an area is polluted, if it contains water, if it contains vegetation, but it does not really assess yet what type of plastic there is. It just knows, okay, there is a lot of plastic or there is only a few items there. So we chop these images into tiles, and then each tile is then basically assessed by the AI what it contains, and you can see the resulting picture there, which is blue and gray. Blue is water, gray is pollution, and the green on the top right corner, you see like a little green spot, and this is vegetation. And this is what the output of the classifier, or the PDD neural network is giving you. And then once we have this information, which areas are polluted in the image, we give this, we use these areas of the image, we chop it into smaller tiles. And we have trained a different network that has a different set of classes, or a different set of answers, which are the individual plastic debris items that can possibly be found in the data. And it tries to classify that if in one of these tiles there is like a plastic bottle, there's a plastic cup, there are shoes, or there's something else in there. So the second network is a bit more detailed on what there is detected, but it's also more targeted because we do not need to examine the entire picture, only the portions that are actually polluted. So in the next slide, there is a high-level view of the architecture. So Mohamed, if you could go to the next slide. Yep. So here you can see a high-level view of the architecture we use. So you can see we have here several convolutional layers. So the large boxes there, conv2D, that stands for convolutional layer. So this is a neural network layer that has these filters applied, like edge detectors. And then the other two large boxes, dense layers, these are fully connected layers. So they have a lot of neurons in them, and they're fully connected to the adjacent layers. And you can see there are basically, in this network, there are 6 hidden layers. So it's a lot larger than the perceptrons that you have seen before on the slide. So they can get really, really large. We have trained this network using Adam Optimizer. So this is the algorithm that actually goes through the whole training and validation cycle and tries to adjust the weights. We have done this over the PDD network. We have trained over 20 epochs, so which means like there were 20 iterations until it stopped training, and the network that was a bit more fine-grained, looking at the individual items, we actually had 40 iterations there. So I'll show you how the data look like. If we go to the next slide. Mohamed, can you go to the next slide? Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So these are the larger tiles that we've seen from the image before. So these are 100 by 100 pixels roughly, and what we do, this we used for the plastic debris detector, so only detecting if there's plastic in there or not, and it would detect Also the level of plastic contamination. So 1 or 2 plastic items would be a low plastic pollution, and high would be more than 3 plastic items in one of these 100 by 100 pixel squares. Actually, it says here 100 by 100 times 3. This is because we use an RGB camera. So the third dimension here is for the colors. So if you go on the next slide, there is the PDQ data set. Morbid, if you can just click on the next slide. Yeah. So the PDQ data set is smaller tiles. Here we try to have them on a size where we can actually identify single items there. So there are 50 by 50 times 3 in the resolution. And well, one more slide ahead, you actually see an overview of the entire data set. So it's not the entire data set, these are just examples for every class, what you can see there. Good. So, and this is what we basically feed the neural network to learn and to train. So we actually have labelers employed here. We have about a group of 5 labelers who do basically then tell us, okay, in this image there is a plastic bottle, in this image there is a paper plate, or in this image there is some a small plastic bag. And we then use this labeled images. We have about 6,000 tiles here that we train the neural networks with, and these are all labeled by a human. And then once we have these images, we then these neural networks, you can of course apply them on data we have not seen before, but we need to go through the effort and actually manually labeling them first. So a quick look at the data. So and the different classes in it. On the graphs on the left-hand side, you can see the distribution of the class labels for the plastic debris detector network, which is basically water, vegetation, sand, litter high, litter low, and potentially something that the other, which means that the network has detected something that it has now not found a particular class for. So we can see there's a bit imbalance. So most of the pictures also contain vegetation and litter high. And on the right-hand side, you see this a similar plot that shows the distribution or the counts of how many tiles there are that contain plastic bags, how many tiles there are that contain plastic bottles. And you can see some of them are really underrepresented, such as plastic canisters, but others such as bottles and polystyrene packing, they are really overrepresented. And this is actually a problem because we would expect a neural network to overfit on this data. It would probably detect plastic bottles very well, but it will probably detect a lot of other things that are not plastic bottles as plastic bottles. So this is actually a problem that we are still facing at the moment. So you can see this problem here. This is a Mohamed, if you can go. Oh, I think we are still not on the right slide. Mohamed, can you click on to the next slide?
Actually, you are in control. So.
Oh, I'm in control. I always see behind you the screen.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So you should see a confusion matrix here now, I hope. Yeah, good. So, so on the left-hand side, you see a confusion matrix for the plastic debris detector, and on the right-hand side, you see the one for the individual plastic items. So a confusion matrix basically shows you the amount of items detected, the predicted classes versus the actual true class labels. So on the vertical, you see the true class labels plotted, and on the horizontal, the predicted ones. And what you can see here, so in an ideal network, we have very high numbers on the diagonal, and on the left-hand side, you can actually see this. What it does mistake a lot is, however, the pollution and pollution few classes. So tiles that have only 2 debris of item and tiles that have more than 2 debris of plastic in it. But this is not really too problematic, because what is really important is that we detect tiles that have plastic debris on it, and we feed these tiles into the next neural network. And of the next neural network, the plastic debris quantifier you see on the right hand side, the confusion matrix doesn't look as good as the previous one. Especially what you can see here is, well, yes, of course, most of the diagonal has the highest numbers, so it goes towards the right direction. But there's some clear overfitting on plastic bottles. If you look at the column where there are plastic bottles, I think this is the column, the 5th from the left, you can actually see that it misclassifies a lot of other things as plastic bottles, and this is the effect of overfitting here. So there's a bit of a problem there. In this study for World Bank, the most important issue is actually the left confusion matrix. So to actually detect that there is plastic and where it is. The one on the right is something that could give us more information where the problem originates from. Like if there are a lot of flip-flops and plastic bottles on the beach, well, maybe we should look at if there's a holiday resort that doesn't take care of the waste management properly. But okay. A few quantitative issues that we have also encountered is shadows. So what you see on this image here is on the left-hand side, there is, oh, I think it's not loading yet. Oh yeah, now it's there, good. I see on the left-hand side, there is a shadow. And if there's a shadow, the neural network, well, doesn't really perform well, I must say. So it detects most of the tiles here as other. So the light blue color means it's some class it hasn't clearly identified. And the same we see on the plastic debris quantifier. There's simply a lot of tiles they're classified as no pollution. Also, they probably contain pollution. It's just not clear because there's a shadow. And sorry, yeah, another problem here is lighting conditions. Apart from in the top figure, you also see an obstacle there. Of course, if there's an obstacle, there's not much we can do about it. We cannot see what is underneath. But you see this metal beam there, so the network misclassifies it there because you cannot see what is underneath. But why I've put this image there, because it is actually overexposed. And overexposed, sorry, it is actually underexposed. And you see, sorry, not under, so it is overexposed. So you can actually see that it comes up with a lot of polystyrene packing, and these are usually materials that are very bright white. And if it's overexposed, means there's a lot of light, and it means that because of the bright light, a lot of items are actually misclassified as polystyrene. And it's underexposed images. We had the effect that a lot of items are actually classified as bottles. So what we did with this study, actually, we derived operations manuals for drone pilots, how to take the pictures. So this was one of the outcomes here, that we actually, in subsequent projects and projects that may be conducted by us or by someone else, actually the drone pilots can get proper training how to go about taking the pictures, the images, so we can do this more reliably. And these sort of images and these sort of outcomes, they are quite visual, and they help the pilots to understand the problem, and they act accordingly. So as a summary, well, plastic debris detector is mostly able to detect pollution, assess its density, and it works on different types of scenes. But sunlight conditions are, can affect the classifications on both networks. Plastic debris quantifier is struggling to detect classes which only have a few samples in the data set. So yeah, the plastic bottles are overrepresented, so it's overfitting on this. But both plastic debris detector and plastic debris quantifier are expected to work better if the number of images increases. And this is actually what we are doing right now. We actually have Cambodia project has been completed, and we are now currently in the Philippines, in Vietnam, and in Myanmar as well, conducting these. But this time is proper operating procedures for the drone pilots. Actually, in Vietnam, we should have gone ourselves because we actually got a brand new drone, which you see on this slide here, to fly over, and we actually have infrared cameras and multispectral cameras as well now to get to distinguish certain aspects of the images better. Unfortunately, due to Corona, we had to hire again a company that does that for us, but having the operations manuals and the operations standard operating procedures actually helped us a lot to improve the results there. Unfortunately, they are not published yet, so I do not want to reveal too much of it, but there is most likely gonna be another paper that has taken care of many of the problems that you have just seen. Especially the problem of class imbalances, I think we have tackled now, because we have a lot of more images from the Philippines and from Vietnam. So we actually have a much better balanced data set now available. It's just the labelers still need to do their work on it. And good. And that's the end of my talk. What you've seen here is also described in the paper, which you can see here. I've given you the DOI, this is an open access paper, so you can download it and read it for free. So it's freely accessible. And well, thank you very much, and I'm happy to take your questions now.
Thank you very much. Thank you.